Hello and welcome to today's video. I found this cloth at a store, and typically I don't buy cloth from the store because it's really expensive, but I fell in love with this stuff. And my first thought was, oh my goodness, Circe from Epic the Musical. So that's what we're going with. I did my typical skirt pattern, and then I measured it out to make it a little bit shorter than what the skirt pattern is, and then just cut all my pieces out. Well, my first piece out. I did 2 panels on this skirt, so I just used the first panel to outline the second one so that I didn't have to do the extra measuring with the second one. It looks so pretty when it sways. Like, look at that. It's gorgeous. Oh my goodness, I was in love. Anyway, so since this is like a satiny type of cloth, I made sure that I was double hemming everything just to make sure nothing's going to like fray too easily. I was warned by several people that that was possible. So yeah, went ahead and made sure that everything got super, super hemmed. And then I sewed my 2 panels of the skirt together down one side. I wanted this to be a type of wrap skirt, so I only sewed it down on one side here. The cloth I'm working with is a little bit stretchy, so it was kind of funky to sew, but this is what it was looking at like, and I was so happy with it. I decided to pair it with this gold silky kind of cloth that I got, and I decided to do a band on the bottom of the skirt as well as along the top of the skirt. I cut out 2 pieces for the band because the skirt bottom was so long that my gold cloth wasn't long enough to just do one long string. So I just halved it and cut out 2 pieces, and then I hemmed the little ends that I was going to sew together. So that's what you're seeing there. I kind of folded them over and then just sewed them up together. And that way the cloth would be less likely to fray. And then I took the middle of my band here, and I started in the middle of the skirt where the 2 panels connected, and then I pinned it along the edge there. And I did a double hem there. I guess it's not really a hem, but like I folded it over double and then sewed it, just again making sure nothing's going to fray. Both the cloths I was working with are apparently fairly easy to fray. So once I had that all sewn up, I folded the end over, and then I sewed up right parallel to the bottom of the skirt there so that I could fold it over and create the other side of the band. I should have done like the double fold on this too, but I forgot, so I'm hoping that that works out. But yeah, I should have done a double fold on that part as well. But oh well, it folded all good, and it was starting to come together real well, and I really liked how the gold paired with the stars in the cloth. And then I just did the inside of the band, folded it over twice, and then pinned it in place there, making sure that it goes up just a little bit past the front of the band. So then when you sew, you're basically sewing just in front of the band, and you're catching the back up in that, if that makes any sense. And then I just did a second band along the top. And again, when you're doing these bands, you sew them along the one side, and then you fold them over the top of the cloth that you're putting the band on, and you make sure that the back of the band kind of goes down a little bit past the front of the band so that you can sew in the seam just along the bottom of the front of the band, and you sew that catches the back of the band, and you can't see the thread because you're sewing in the seam. It's really complicated, and I'll probably do a whole video on it at some point. I just watched a couple YouTube videos to figure it out myself, so if there's any interest in that, I will do it eventually because it is really, really useful to know when you're making projects like these. But yeah, anyway, I started doing the band along the top, and I did make a mistake, and I sewed it on the inside of the skirt first. You have to start by sewing it on the outside, but I figured I would go ahead and pin the fold of the edge just so that I had that in place, and go ahead and sew on my little button clasps. I wanted this to be a tie skirt, but I also wanted to put in the buttons because the silkiness of the cloth made me think that it would untie very easily, which would not be fun to work with. So I decided I'd just throw some buttons in just for the extra security. And I put in 3 different ones just so that there were different ranges that you could button it at. So whatever I felt like tightening it to at whatever point, I could choose what I wanted to do with that. I was super careful at this point because I was afraid that I was going to like snag the silky cloth and cause like a run in it. I almost did at one point, but never really actually made a full run. So yay, victory in that regard. Then I went ahead and I sewed up the fold at the end, and I did that by hand because it was so small and the cloth was so delicate that I was like, I'm just going to do this by hand just for my own peace of mind, you know, at this point. I don't need the machine for this. And then because I had sewn the first side of the band on wrong, I undid all of that stitching and I went ahead and fixed that just so that it was easier. I was going to try and find a different way to do it, but it wasn't working. I really didn't want to use my seam ripper because I was afraid of tearing one of the cloths, but it did come off okay. So the seam ripper did not destroy anything. Huzzah for that. And then I just went on and re-sewed the front of that band onto the top of the skirt. I left 7 inches out at each end of the skirt, and that was going to be like my tie there. So that's the little end bit you can see sticking out there. And then when I pinned this in place to do the second half of the band, I only sewed up to where the skirt ended. I didn't sew up along the rest of the band because I was using blue thread in my sewing machine, and that would have been too visible. So then I had that opening, and I basically just took it and folded it all in, and then I sewed it up by hand. I didn't want to have to get the whole gold thread into my sewing machine. It was too much work, so I was like, I'm just going to do this by hand. And it did work out. And again, I was very careful to make sure I didn't pull too hard at any of the fabric. Then I started on the top, and I basically just marked out a rectangle of cloth and then duplicated it, pretty much, because I wanted this to be a tank top kind of looking top here. So yeah, just a rectangle, and I hemmed both pieces again just to make sure no fraying, no nothing. So yeah, I hemmed them before I sewed the two pieces together, but then once I had them hemmed, I did sew them up along one side. And I knew I wanted bands on the top and bottom of this shirt as well, so I only sewed it up one side to begin with. Again, you have to be a little bit careful with that kind of cloth because it was stretchy, so it was a little bit funky in the machine. But then I just marked out gold cloth to make 2 more bands on the top and bottom, and just very quickly did that. I feel like I'm getting quick at these bands. I've done so many of them. Then I cut out 2 rectangles to use for my sleeves, and I hemmed them. Again, very worried about this cloth, so just went ahead and hemmed them. And then I folded them over, and this was how I was going to make the sleeve and kind of hide any seams, or at least most seams. So yeah, I just folded them both over, and I left one end open, and then I sewed up the long side and then one other end. That way I could flip them inside out, which is what you'll see here in a minute. I just flipped it inside out, made sure all the corners were sharp, and voila, I had one sleeve. And then I just took the end that I had left open and I sewed that up by hand. Now, I didn't want these sleeves to be just simple straps, so I gathered one end. As you can see, I just folded it a couple times, and then I sewed that folded so that it would be easier to work with. It was a little messy to sew it, but it kind of worked. So once I had it like that, then I did the other end. It kind of looked like a candy wrapper. And then I just sewed both ends onto the top of the shirt on the front and back, and I used the blue thread so that you couldn't see it, and then I sewed up the shirt. The shirt is a little tighter than I would have liked, and I'm not sure I love the sleeves, but here is the end result, and oh my goodness, you cannot tell me this is not the most beautiful cloth ever. It's gorgeous, and I am obsessed with it. I love Circe, love Epic the Musical, can't wait to make this a full cosplay with accessories and stuff. Yeah, I love it. But yeah, anyway, that's today's video, and thank you for watching.